Hi everyone, it's Gary Bernklow here, and the time has finally come for me to reveal where the Resolute treasure was hidden. So I produced a short video here to explain everything in the poem, how you could find the treasure, what everything means, and you can tell I'm wearing my adventure hat. So let's get started. First of all, let's look at the clues that I provided that were in addition to those found in the poem. Remember I said that the treasure was not in a program area, not in a campsite, not in or on a building, and not buried. I also know that every character, punctuation mark, word, and sentence in the poem was a clue, and that's going to be important information to remember as we explore the solution. Lastly, I told you that the whole thing could be solved if you could figure out the first two lines. The poem itself provides two different ways to solve the puzzle, and as I mentioned, that could be done using just the first two lines, but I'm going to save that for the end of this. So let's look at the poem starting with the line, "Begin with God and geometry met." So if we go ahead and we do a quick search on the old Google machine for God and geometry, well, as you expect, a bunch of weird stuff pops up, but there's one item that I would say is interesting: Freemasonry. Freemasonry began as an organization of masons or stoneworkers. Here, the images on the poem should have helped you out. If you look at the bug guy in two of the corners of the poem image, you'll find out it's really just an altered, stylized image drawn from the actual symbol of Freemasonry. And the only place in camp that would exemplify masonry is the Whitman Hall chimney. It was built by a mason named Hugh Smith and has remained virtually unchanged since its construction in 1924. The monument in front of the chimney, it's difficult to read now, but the inscription reads, "Dedicated to Sir Robert Baden-Powell by H.C.S. Smith." So this is where our quest begins, starting at the Baden-Powell stone directly in front of Whitman Hall. The next line instructs us next to the fen, the nearest one yet. This is the most straightforward and easy clue in the entire poem. It means exactly what it says. What's a fen? Fen is a low and marshy, frequently flooded area of land. The closest area to the dining hall that meets that description is down the left fork, on the right-hand side, across from the small cove on the pond. This area is typically a swamp, at least in non-severe drought years anyway. This is the fen we're looking for. From there, the poem tells us to eschew the step that remains. There are actually two clues embedded in this line. The first is, of course, the definition of steppe, which means an extensive plain, especially one without trees. So from the fen, you can see a plain without trees at what is now the basketball court. That area, in fact, has been named the Plains since the inception of the camp, although that name is a little known today. Still, on many maps, it is labeled the Plains. The second clue here is the step that remains. This is just confirmation that the step is on the left side. After all, something that remains is something that is left. The next line leads us out toward the kid's memorable stade, and you could probably guess at this point where it's leading. It's leading towards the ball field, but what does it mean? A stade is just another word for stadium. That's all it means. And the kid, well, that's one of the many nicknames given to Ted Williams. So, if Ted Williams were at Resolute, where would he go play? He would go play at the ball field. In fact, when he was a rookie with the Red Sox in 1939, Williams did exactly that when he visited Resolute on one of his days off, signed autographs, and took pictures. So this is sending you out towards the ball field. Once at the ball field, of course, the next line asks you to pass 10 feathers and spur the way. And this is actually one of the most difficult clues to resolve in the poem, but it can be solved in a couple of ways. First of all, 10 feathers. Basically, that's a reference to the official flag of the Kiowa Nation. So the line is asking you to go beyond Kiowa. The second way to view this is to completely ignore the 10 feathers and focus on the spur the way. A spur is a very well-known railroad term meaning a short branch or line. So this term alone should point you in the direction of the trestle, a well-known old railway line which cuts directly through Resolute. Of course, the trestle runs in front of Kiowa, and it extends to the left and to the right. So which way to go? Well, to the left leads you out of camp. It makes no sense to go to the left, so we'll go to the right. And again, we're going to keep in mind spur of the way. We're looking for a spur. What would be a railroad spur? What might be considered a railroad spur off the trestle? And at the end down here, towards the Kiowa latrine, you'll see a drop off on the right-hand side. On the left, you see a path. Yes, it goes to the Kiowa latrine, but it also goes somewhere else. This is an actual spur off the old railway line. If you look at an old LiDAR image, and you can see it right here, that this line is the trestle, and you can see this other line coming off. It's an actual spur, and that's where we're heading. So as we walk past the Kiowa latrine and follow this little spur, lo and behold, there is a path. The path extends out, and the path keeps going. And if we continue to follow the path, we'll end up at a fireplace. And now we're giving very explicit instructions. Back to comfort, perched on the blaze. Well, we have a fire pit. What might back to comfort mean? Well, behind us, if we turn around, we can actually see the Kiowa latrine, a bathroom, a comfort station. So if I put my back towards that, I put my feet right on the fire pit, and I'm ready. I need to sight the big 141, a copse away. Well, here's where a little bit of imagination helps out. If you look carefully into the trees, you'll see a couple of bendy, kind of weird looking trees here. Now, I'm going to help you out. How about that? That's a 141 made out of the trees. That's what this is asking you to find. I can focus in on it a little bit. There it is. 141. You'd also be interested to know that the poem itself has that tree formation as its borders, just kind of elongated and extended a little bit. So there it is, the same thing. That's what it looks like. And of course, next we're sent under the crook. The bear is our aim. A couple of different things for this. First of all, we want to go under the crook. That's where we want to be. There's only one tree with a massive crook in it, so we're going to go over here and we're going to face north. And why are we going to face north? Because the bear is our aim. The bear, of course, in this case, I'm going to point my feet north. What I'm referencing here for the bear is Ursa Major, the Great Bear, the Big Dipper, kind of a universal symbol for north. So it's telling you to face north. So I'm going to face north from the crook. And now we're told to pace, the chain of life in pairs. I had a lot of questions about this one from folks, but I actually thought it was rather obvious. Again, if you actually just Google search chain of life in pairs, this is what comes up. 46 chromosomes. That's exactly what I was referring to. So if there are 46 chromosomes, that's 23 pairs. So we're going to walk from that crook directly north for 23 paces. And yeah, once you get through all the brush, you end up right here. And the next line, of course, tells us, "Too long there be mire, please beware." That's just a notification that if you've walked into the swamp, you've gone too far. Sure enough, just on the other side of here, there is swamp. Again, there would be if there weren't a severe drought. And as we come to the second to last line, which states, "At the mighty with phantom pain." The mighty, as you might have guessed, is an oak tree. But what's phantom pain? Well, phantom pain is a pain that patients experience who have lost a limb, typically. Um, you append that to a tree, for instance, and it basically means a false or missing limb. There's nothing on that oak tree, but if we keep looking in the distance, lo and behold, something looks weird about this limb on this tree. In fact, it's a fake limb drilled directly into the tree and holding, you guessed it, a small canister. And the last line telling us to reach, O heavens, and end the game, it's a directive. Just to reach up to that branch, pull out the canister, and claim your prize. So now that you know where the treasure was and how the clues lead you there step by step, um, as a treasure hunt would, as a treasure map would, let's talk a little bit about the first two lines of the poem and how you could get pretty close to the treasure just by using those first two lines. And the lines we're talking about here are oddly set from the Lord's stele, an even foundation from the Bastille. Let's look at the first one, oddly set from the Lord's stele. So what is a stele? Well, a stele is another term for stela. And stela is an upright stone slab or column typically bearing a commemorative inscription or relief design, often serving as a gravestone. So what might meet the criteria for a stele at Camp Resolute? I think you probably already know the answer to that. It is, again, the stone that sits in front of the dining hall. And you have the added advantage of that fact of the stone being dedicated to Robert Baden-Powell, who was a lord. So the Lord's stele is Baden-Powell's stone. So it's directing you to start from there. That's one of the points of the first two lines to start with. The second line, of course, reads, an even foundation from the Bastille. So it's directing you to the Bastille. And the Bastille at Resolute is the waterfront tower. That, of course, stems from the long-standing camp tradition of having the Scoutcraft area attack the waterfront area on Bastille Day, July 14th every year. So we kind of nicknamed the waterfront tower the Bastille. And if you actually look in the corners of the actual poem, you'll see this symbol that is meant to be the sun and the waterfront tower, kind of, again, a stylized version. I couldn't make it too obvious, so that's what that means. So we have the waterfront tower and the Baden-Powell stone in front of the dining hall as starting points to help us try to track down our treasure. But what do the rest of these things mean? You may notice that the sentences are quirky, they're odd, they're kind of bizarrely written, and that's on purpose, and this is why. Each one of these sentences was specifically designed to contain certain properties, and the properties that we're talking about here are separated by odd and even lines. You'll notice the first line says oddly set, and the second line, and even foundation. Those are very specific directions. If we look at this line by line, and we actually do a character count of each one of these lines, here's what we see. Characters of 31, 37, 31, 37, 31, 37, repeated over and over again. The odd lines contain 31 characters, and all of the even lines contain 37 characters. As you can probably guess where this is going now, you should be able to use those two values, 31 and 37, from their corresponding starting points to find where the treasure is. Of course, this would be a relative bearing from a specific point. So in this case, you would treat the starting point as 0 degrees, just like it was your compass was pointing north. When you actually do that and mark that as 0 degrees and measure out 30 degrees, 31 degrees from the dining hall, this is what you come up with. The arrow actually moves to the right, pointing towards the left fork of camp. And that's exactly what you're hoping for. If you do it the other way, you actually end up in Little Pond, right? So this is what it looks like if you draw 31 degrees from the dining hall in a straight line, using this old map again. And if you draw 37 degrees from the waterfront tower, this is what you get. And lo and behold, where the two cross, X marks the spot. So there you have it. That's the solution to the puzzle, and hopefully next year we'll be able to run something like this again. Now that you know how my brain works and how these poems work, hopefully you'll be able to solve it this time. Thanks.